I'll tell you something I've never told anybody. It was everything you could ever hope for in a coach. Who's the president of the West Coast Eagles? The great thing about journalism, it gives you the front row seat to history. I might have had a Charlie in the Chocolate Factory view of the world in those days, but that was my world. I need your men for one more week and we'll create history and it'll go down in folklore. Being jaded, I think, is the curse of life.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you what, this has been a big gather round over here for BackChat, and we are very lucky to have this man in studio with us. He's carved out just whatever time we can get out of him, of his very busy schedule, to be here on BackChat with us. Eddie McGuire, how are you, mate?
Hey, when I got the invitation, I said, right, that's it. Hold the phones.
Right.
My PA, Carolyn, I said, get rid of all appointments.
Right.
Tell the Premier to wait.
You're a good man there, because I think you're actually going to a lunch with him. So wrap it up, boys. Mate, BackChat powered by Paywise this year. You're going to like some of these sponsor intros.
I like that, Paywise. That's good. They're great sponsors, and we recommend that you support them off the back of this podcast.
That'll be rolled out as an ad for the next 18 months, Eddie. Haven't signed an agreement yet. Really excited to have you in here, mate. But I reckon we've done about 200 of these guest interviews now. We ask the same question every time.
Sure.
And it was actually my wife that came up with this idea.
Best ideas generally come from that direction.
Exactly right.
In my case.
Exactly right. So we want to know, thanks to TABtouch, your greatest sporting achievement. Now, when we interview someone who's been an AFL player or a swimmer or a runner, and I know you played footy, right? Yeah. I know you're in development squads, but I give the caveat your greatest sporting achievement not in your selected sport. So I would like to know, but what I'm going to do, given that most people know you for your media exploits, I'd just like to know your greatest sporting achievement, Eddie McGuire.
Sporting achievement?
Yeah, sporting achievement. So, Eddie, I was a state 80-metre hurdle champion, right, as an under-9. Dan, 5 for 16 in the grand final.
Yeah.
12's cricket.
Fantastic.
Yep.
I think the under-17 4x100 metre record still stands.
Wow.
Which I was the starter. It's a while back now, so that was about 1981, I think.
You're a sprinter
at Olympic Park. I was a bit of a hybrid. I ran the 800 as well, but not as the guy whose name was Jared McGuire, no relation. He was state champion alongside me, so I saw the back of him for a bit. But the sprinting was okay. But that, and I think the one that made the most impact on me was I won the best and fairest in grade 6 and got picked in a big rep side, and we went to Sydney, and then I won a scholarship to go to CBC St Kilda. And for me, it was a pivotal moment in my life that I realised, right, I can go, I can compete. And I might have only been in grade 6, but I read, just everything that was going on, and motivational books and newspapers, and all the sporting heroes and all that type of thing. And for me, it's sport, and what I love about AFL football and Collingwood in particular is it gave me a sense of identity in when I was living in Broadmeadows. It was a pretty tough world out there, and it's I always think of the John Lennon line in Working Class Hero where he says, they hate you if you're clever and they despise a fool. And you can get caught in those situations until you can break through. So for me, as a young boy, winning the best and fairest that year, and then when I went to CBC in Form 1, I actually won the best and fairest the next year as well. I thought, right, I can play in the whatever league it is. Yeah. Now, in my mind, it was the big league, and everyone else's was just another school football team, but it made a big impact on me as a kid.
So, I mean, that was your formative years, of course. Like, what was growing up like for Eddie McGuire? Because people see Eddie McGuire, CEO of many companies, and they think, oh, he's just, he's a gun. But what was life like?
No, it's like everything. You actually are still the same person you are as a kid in a lot of ways, because you're coming at it from a different point of view. So I've had an amazing life, but I still see myself as that kid, and it was very much. My parents came out. My father's from Glasgow. He was in the coal mines when he was 12 years of age. His big career break was World War II to get out of the mines. So he used to run the pit ponies down under the ground. Wow. And his parents had come over from Ireland to get away from the deprivation of everything that was going on in Ireland. So we've had a generational jump, and luckily for us, we had a big jump when we came to Australia. Yeah. And my mum was Irish, and she was on the farm in those days that had a well, and the livestock were basically it was third world. Built up, and I go back and have a look at it and you go, wow, this was quite amazing. So the £10 tourists came out to Australia, And so from my point of view there, my dad and mum were very much that this is absolutely God's own country. If you've got any ability here and you set yourself, you'll be able to do things. And so we had this sense of adventure because we didn't have any family out here. So we were sort of isolated. We lived in a concrete commission house out in Broadmeadows, which was built basically as cannon fodder for the factories. My mum worked, up in Nabisco and Yakka, which were the Collingwood sponsors, and Ericsson and all those factories up in Broadmeadows. And my dad worked for the Border Works at, laying literally the sewage and the water for metropolitan Melbourne and things like that. So, but for them, it was always about this opportunity. And so we were, I suppose you look at it now, we were poor, but we had this rich family. Education was everything. Sport was everything. We didn't ever go on holidays, but every week we went to something. So the MCG became my theatre of dreams. Mamba was massive. So you go, and my dad being a canny Scotsman would say, stand over here on the other side opposite the town hall. He said, because all the VIPs are over there, so they'll play their best music, they'll do their best tricks. This is the place to stand and come over here in the shade. And so it was smart like that. And so we had that, and then we had my brother was a good sportsman, and so we're always going everywhere. But we did everything. I was in the brass band. I should have said that. Australian brass band champion.
Yes.
Baby. Playing the euphonium.
The what?
The euphonium. Do you know what euphonium is?
Band's a music man.
I actually don't. It sounds like a thing that you hit.
No, quite the opposite. No, it's the bass end melody in a brass band. It's like a tuba.
Yeah,
so it's the bass end of that to the counter to the cornet or the trumpets or cornet and the.
So you're the Australian band.
We won the school, yeah. We're Australian schoolboy champions. We went up to Sydney and fixed them up, sang the song afterwards. Hooli pop, and the old war cry of CBC. So we were involved in everything. And I look back now, and for what my life turned into in media, it was unbelievably fortuitous. That really, if you looked at where we lived, the house, the suburb, the social situation, everything about it, we could have been totally isolated. And instead, because of the wonderful support of my parents who sacrificed everything to come here, and it was never lost on us because we didn't have a phone. So we'd get the airmail would come in from Scotland, from, my auntie and my grandmother and things like that. And, I was only a little boy, but you could sense the isolation. There was two really intelligent people. And Melbourne back in the 50s and the 60s, pretty tough. I mean, they used to have NCA in the newspapers in those days, no Catholic apply for jobs. Right? So don't forget, we had to get the 67 to get rid of White Australia policy. Yep. And it was on. And my mum went to England, she landed on VE Day, I think, after the war. And even then it used to have, no blacks, no Catholic. No blacks, no Irish. Right. Excuse me, and that was still the prevailing wind even in Australia. So, it was a pretty tough thing. So for us to come in and have this just open up in front of us and opportunities and, win scholarships and, win football matches and all that sort of stuff was just magical for us. So, I might have had a Charlie in the Chocolate Factory view of the world in those days, but that was my world and it opened up for me. And, I was lucky enough, I was writing for the newspaper, for the Herald, when I was 14. I've had a press pass since I was 14.
Well, so when you say lucky, what does that mean? I know it's fortunate and you look back and you think, what an opportunity. But I'd assume that you don't just lob up at the Herald Sun and go, hey, give us a pen.
Well, that was probably the Joe the Goose into the open goal that I got. Was my brother started as a cadet, and he started writing sports and then politics, and then became a politician later on. Was a two-time Walkley Award-winning journo. But they needed somebody on a Saturday, and he said, I could get my brother. Didn't say how young I was. So I put on his suit. I put his suit on, turned up, and it was okay. But it was funny at times. I'd play in the morning for school and then put the suit on over the top. And people would go, Jesus, you can smell the liniment today. It's great. I've still got the mud on my knees and all the rest of it. And the old, we go to the Lake Oval where you used to actually sit. Literally, the press box was on a half-forward flank on the ground, basically. So you could hear the players yelling out. And they used to have the police horses underneath. So you'd have the police horses and the coppers underneath. They'd be, farting and shitting all day and all that sort of stuff. I remember there was a legendary veteran journalist called Jack Dunn of the Sun in those days. And Jack did football and boxing, and he was just this great old hard-nosed journo. He was straight out of central casting of an old journo. And Jack had a gammy leg, and the boys used to open the long necks and have a few beers while the game was on and taking their notes. Anyway, Jack found it hard getting up and down the stairs, so he relieved himself. I remember my brother going, lift your feet up. And I said, what do you mean? He said, just shut up and lift your feet up. So I'm in the press box like that. Oh, Jack's taking a leg, and we didn't realise, of course, it was an old wooden floor, so it was dripping down onto the police officer underneath. And suddenly there's a knock on the door, and the cops have come up. Hey, whoever's spilling that stuff, it's going all over. Well, imagine the press box has just erupted.
Yeah.
So they were the fun and games of things. And yes, I was 13, 14 at that stage. I was in what was year 8, Form 2 back in those days. And so going, and then they needed a reporter for the cricket over the summer. And my brother said, no, he can do it again. And they still didn't know I was filing copy. And because I was young, the people who used to do my job, which was called a phone man, I literally brought the phone, plugged it in, did the stats, but then I'd run down while my brother was filing copy straight into the paper, and I'd run into the rooms and get the injuries and the reports. Because most of the guys who were doing my job were old journos who were getting a bit of beer money and to go to the footy, the guys in their 60s and things like that, they started holding the paper open for me to come back with the reports. Of course, I thought this was unbelievable. I'm sprinting along and jumping in there and loving it. And then I had the same sort of thing. My brother gave me great advice and started doing the cricket, and a couple of stories happened there. We ended up on the front page. And the next year, I went and covered the reserves one day, and Luke Ball's father, Ray Ball, who was a great footballer in his day, I had my first front page story on the Herald, which was Ball Bears All. And at half time in the reserves game, he came on. He was the runner. And the umpire said, come on, you've had him for 20 minutes. Get off. I want to start the game. And as Ray turned around and ducked off, he flashed his backside to the umpire, and the umpire saw it and reported him. So my first front page story, Ray Ball says he made my career.
Yeah.
Ball Bears All.
That's so good.
And so that's sort of where it was. And then from there, how do these things happen? I just sort of kept going, and I started working at Channel 10 when I was still at school. I sent a letter, was invited in for an interview, and a bit like that, they saw all these things that I'd been doing, whether it was sports or academic and working for the paper and doing all this sort of stuff. And David Johnson, the famous newsreader, got me in and was a bit intrigued, and they got me to come in and work on weekends when I was finishing off my year 12, and I couldn't believe it. And you couldn't get from Broadmeadows to Nunawading. It was about as far as it went. You couldn't be any further away. And my dear old dad used to drive me out, come and pick me up, and I'd drive home, come pick me up, and spent the weekend. And then I turned 18 in late October, and he just said, well, take the car and away you go. So they supported us on everything we did.
Yeah. At some point, did they find out how old you were? Or
yeah, they did. Well, they found out. I got invited to the Ryder Medal, which was the Brownlow Medal of District Cricket.
Yeah.
And I was going to win an award because I'd done all right, and they thought I was the bloke's son. And I turned up with my brother and I said, how old are you? And by this stage, I was 15. I said, oh, and then they actually got in on it. They said, oh, this is great. We've got this young kid who's out and having a real go. So I'm very lucky, guys, in that, and this is why I set up our business. It's called Jam TV, and it's actually the initials of my sons, Joe and Alexander McGuire. And the reason for it is I want it to be a family business. And I've largely done it without sounding like St Vincent de Paul, because along the way, so many people just gave me that little bit of a hand up. And I remember them all. And I remember the situations, and I remember that next step. People like Bruce McAvaney when I was at Channel 10, I was getting offers from 7 and 9, and he could have easily put his foot on my head and stopped my progression. Instead, he turbocharged me, and they gave me a segment called Doing the Rounds, which was the first big football segment on a television news. Went for 8 minutes a night. Now, basically, I was stealing his real estate.
Yeah.
So Bruce would throw to me, and then he'd cover the other stories and the racing and things. But ostensibly, I was doing all the football stories, and in Melbourne, that's everything. And he encouraged me. He took me to London to call my first ever AFL game, which was the Battle of Britain game when Clarkson, Kinghead, Aitken, and so my first 4 calls of VFL / AFL were in Tokyo, Vancouver, and London, which wasn't bad.
Which maybe at the time was considered a graveyard shift, but when you look back on it, it's like how brilliant. And I've heard a lot from, you clearly know him a lot better than me, but Bruce McAvaney, I've heard that story that you're telling from a lot of people.
Well, Bruce's generosity comes from the fact that he knows he's good. And he is
not
comfortable,
something.
not threatened, comfortable, and includes people. And I've hopefully taken that as well. And I like to promote people coming through and give people opportunities and the likes. And we're talking about, even your business, where it's going now. And I want people to do well. There's no point having a place in the south of France if you're sitting all on your own. I'd like to have everyone around me. We'll go and watch the footy. That's
exactly.
That's sort of the way I am. And watching my boys coming through now, it's great to see them and all their friends. So it's really exciting to sort of be involved in helping them start their careers and lives. But back then, so there was Bruce. I mean, I worked with Steve Quartermain. We were the Daily Double in those days at nightclubs and hosting shows and doing all sorts of things and breaking stories and so many people along the way in radio. The D generation. How lucky was I that Working Dog were doing the radio, and I got a tap on the shoulder at the Brownlow one night from Rob Sitch and Sando Chilaro. Come and join now. They're lifelong friends. Joan and Rob are the godparents of my son, and we travel together. We've been great friends for it must be nearly 40 years now, or 35 years. So then I started on the radio there, and different things happen. And Richard Stubbs and all these people sort of coming and going, and you pick up so much from them. And people like Roland Roccacelli, who worked in the West End and had a pure theatre background. And you learnt so much on how you set things up. The cameraman back in the day would tell you how to really stand. And I see a lot of that skill not happening now, that when you're doing a linking stand-up, you turn your shoulder so there's a visual cue. When you're doing a closing stand-up, you do it square on so it's a visual clue of a full stop. And, using props. People think that it's a memory competition. No, it's not. It's a communications competition. So stand there, use your notepad, and I quote, bang, 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 bang. That type of thing, and it makes a big difference. But that was observed, but also taught by people who knew the business back in those days. So I've been very, very, very fortunate to have a lot of great people in my corner.
I mean, given your time in media, mate, like I was talking to you in the elevator on the way up here that you would know way better than me of the actual content that's rolling out. I was sort of thinking with your career and what you've done, it's a little bit full circling at the moment. Like, that we've gone from all the things you've just spoken about, the first footy segment and your live shows with Quartermain and the footy show, and it's raw. Like, if you look back at what you were doing, at some stage you'd be like, what were we doing?
Well, the footy show's a really good example.
Well, correct. But then it went really highly produced, cookie-cutted. But I feel like it might be back on the way towards footy show type.
Oh, I think it is, I think as these things become... In fact, the genesis of the footy show was because Channel 7 at that stage put a decree out, no more nicknames. They wanted it to become... and that was to Bruce's forehand. Analytical, statistical, all that type of thing. Bruce is theatrical as well. I mean, Bruce got a great turn of phrase, and Dennis Committee is just, a beautiful wordsmith, and, a pleasure working with Dennis along the journey. But at that stage, the banner they'd stopped World of Sport, which had got to its end because everyone was old. And so it was a new thing coming through. So when I was doing things on Channel 10, Nine had seen me, and I was hosting sportsman's nights and all that sort of stuff, and emceeing everything that was going on. And again, people gave me the chance. Ron Walker would get me out of nowhere to host the Grand Prix Ball in Melbourne, and suddenly you're introducing, the greatest drivers. Schumacher, I was thinking, but he also had Krista Berg got up and sang Lady in Red one night, and when it was the biggest hit in the world. And
with Isaac Rankin about it.
Exactly. And I'm sitting down there having dinner with Eddie Jordan and all that. It's just amazing situations. The great thing about journalism, and my brother told me this earlier on, he said, Ed, it gives you the front row seat to history, and you get to meet everybody. And I was there holding the microphone under Alan Bond's nose when he was the Richmond president, when he said our great player Dale Whiteman, not Dale Waitman, didn't know his name, and he'd been brought in because they wanted his money to keep Richmond surviving. Collingwood was talking to Robert Holmes a court at one stage. All these sorts of things, and then you realised, and then Christopher Skase came in, And you actually see some people who are absolutely brilliant and some who are just absolutely making it up as they go and were just bullshit artists on the run, but could make it happen. It was, but a lot of those things were like Ponzi schemes back in those days. And
So what was the footy show?
so the footy show came about because I felt that I'd go out and do these sportsman nights and everyone's roaring with laughter and loving it. The radio was really going, the breakfast shows that I was doing with Richard Stubbs and the D Generation. And I started my own show called The Grill Team. And ratings went like that first time, just off the chart. Highest rating show, I think, ever on a Saturday morning in Melbourne. And it was with Trevor Marmalade and Jane Kennedy, and we had Roland Roccacelli and Glenn Robbins and all these people coming in who had a different take on things. And I love the eclectic nature of it. And I think what happens sometimes these days is because the media is under so much stress, there's very few people. I mean, you have a look at the newspaper writers now; they're churning out reams of content, and then they're also on TV. Most of them on Fox Footy and things. So it's hard. I mean, it really is intense. So the footy show came about because I remember Ian Johnson, who was one of the driving forces behind it at Channel 9, and he said to me one day, he said, "I've got this idea for a co-host for you." And I'm like, here we go. This is the moment of truth. And he said, "What about Sam Newman?" And I'd met Sam 10 years earlier when he looked after me one night. In fact, I hadn't even got a full-time job. I was working part-time at Channel 10, and it was an electronic media night at VFL House. And I turned up there, and Channel 10 guys said, "Look, it's on your way home. Go in. They might have some paraphernalia, the annual report or whatever it is. See if there's anything there, see if there's a story." So I turn up, and it was like the lift opening up into, one of the great Hollywood parties, because I looked in and there was Drew Morfitt grabs me. "G'day, son. Who are you?" I was, "Oh, I'm Eddie McGuire from Channel 10, I think." Shakes me, "Come in, son." And he introduces me to Jack Dyer, Lou Richards, Bob Davis. Sam Newman strolls in, who's just the newly finished 300-game veteran but a bon vivant around town. I got my hand crushed by E.J. Whitten. "Come over here, son." They've got the long necks open and we're standing around and they're telling all the war stories of, state matches and all these things and all the stories that I heard. Neil Roberts was there, great raconteur, and, all these people who I grew up idolising and just watching. They were the superheroes of my life. They played football. I went and saw them play. Or there's Lou, and I found out Lou was a Collingwood captain. Wow. Ron Casey ran the town. And suddenly I'm standing there. The week before I was doing my HSC exams, I was trying to get a date at the social. And suddenly I'm standing there in with these guys. And the story goes, the end of the night, Drew said, "What are you doing, son?" "We're going out for dinner." Oh, well, I'm not going to pass on that. I've got $5 in my pocket, right? I've got $5 my pocket money from my dad, right? And when I say I was working at Channel 10, I was working. They weren't paying. I certainly hadn't cashed the $20 check I was getting for working there. Anyway, we go around to Toorak, which I'd never really been to, park the car at this place called Topo's, which the coincidence is now my office is 3 doors up from there. And we go in and Sam said, "You got to have the pepper steak." And I'd never had anything more exotic than Mum's Irish stew. So I've had the pepper steak. It burnt a hole in the roof of my mouth. And I'm looking up the pepper steak, $15. I've got 5. Geez, I'm in trouble here. I'll see if I can do the dishes, or I'll say to the guy, "I've left my wallet, do the Aussie haka."
Yeah.
Anyway, Sam and Drew have twigged that, what was going on. Of course, Sam says, "Now, Drew, I owe you that from the tennis game. You beat me last week. And Ed, I'm picking it all up." And I'm thanks. And then he said, "Come on, we're going across to Silver's, the nightclub across. Would you like to come to Silver's discotheque?" Sam says. "Do I ever?" Straight across, front of the line, drink card, first one ever. Wow, this is unbelievable. And Sam, I remember following Sam like a puppy dog as he walked across the dance floor to the DJ. He said, "Play that new song, Jack and Diane, Johnny Cougar." And the bloke straight away changes it. What's going on here? And I'll never forget the guys, the manager who was looking after us, said to me, he said, "Oh, good to meet you, Ed. The friend of Sam's and Drew's, you're part of the team. Anytime you come, ask for me." I reckon I was there at 7 o'clock the next night trying to get in. So this was, for me, it was just Boys Own annual stuff. It was unbelievable. Everything was an adventure. And I always say, I've been lucky in that in the buffet of life, I filled my plate and go and enjoy everything. plenty of time to do other things, but get in and enjoy it and have fun and try and keep the, that childhood. My time now at Collingwood, when it's finished, I've really tried hard, and I think I've got there, to have my childlike love of the club and the game. So I've been in it right up to my neck as a president and reporter, and, being jaded, I think, is the curse of life. So I never wanted to become jaded about going to the footy. And I want to go there, and I want to, when the pies run out, I want to get that feel again and up on my toes, and and immerse myself in it. It's get out and what was Mike Brady singing up there, Gazelle? Me, I like football. There's a lot of things around, but when I line them up together, the footy wins hands down. That's me.
Yeah.
I'm that kid, and it gave me a world that I might never have found. And so for a bloke who didn't ever play the game, I reckon I've just about been given nearly the most amount of riches out of it. It's so I never, ever feel that the game owes me, and certainly not Collingwood owes me anything. I'll be in debt till I'm pushing up daisies.
You've mentioned Collingwood a lot of times since we started. You obviously love the club.
I do love the club, yeah.
When obviously in the early days as a kid, you weren't getting to watch Collingwood every week.
No.
How you why did Collingwood sort of?
Well, Peter McKenna was my hero. My family were very Essendon, and because we lived out that way, and but I fell in love with Peter McKenna. And there's stories I've told before about I came home one day in grade prep, so I was 5, and in those days they had Jiffy donut bags. So Jiffy donuts were donuts, jam donuts without the hole in them. The ones you get at the front of the footy, and they used to have the theme songs on them. And I walked around the corner this day, and my brother thought this was a passing phase because I love my brother and my dad and all that. And they'd go to Windy Hill, and I'd go to Windy Hill more than I'd go to anywhere else because it was the local team. And over the back fence was Carlton's own, and Bruce Dool lived around the corner, and Curly Austin and these guys. So here's, and across the road was Mark Dawson, who played at North, and we're in North Melbourne zone. So really it was probably Essendon, Carlton or North, except I fell in love with Peter McKenna. And anyway, this day I'm walking home, and I was starting to waver a bit because my brother was driving me mad about it. Come on, you're not going to come to the football if you don't break for Essendon and all that sort of thing. And I saw this Jiffy donut. This sounds like, I describe it as being like Saul on the road to Damascus, and suddenly I could see. And this Jiffy donut bag, I wish I'd have kept it. I picked it up, and I thought, if it's got the Collingwood theme song on it, it's a sign, and I'll be a Collingwood bloke. And I opened up, and there it was.
Yeah.
And right, that's it. And my poor old brother Frank came home a couple of weeks later. I'm standing at the gate with my black and white jumper and number 6 on the back, and that was it.
Well, mate, just before we started this, I don't know what I thought, but I was sort of like, you're still a Collingwood fan. Like, given that you're not working at the club anymore, it's like, I don't know what I thought, but you said, yeah, Collingwood till I die, basically, right? Like, you're party to die.
That's it. Yeah.
You must look back then at being a fan, and that's something that I always respected of you from afar. They'd cut to you in the stands, and you're a fan. Like, you're a president. Yeah. You're a fan, mate. Like, you're in there. You're riding the bumps.
Well, I am. I'm intense at the football because I love the game. I love the tactics. And when you're the president, you go in, you've got all the sponsors. You've got to give the president's address and all that, the lunch, and you've got to entertain. So when I took over, we were shot. And the first year, we won the wooden spoon. And the second year, we finished second bottom. And but the only thing I could do was fix up the lunch. That was showbiz, I was hosting the footy shows and the lunch and the dinner. So we turned that into something, and then we went and got Versace to change it. So started doing all these different stunts. And I found that we didn't have any sponsorship coming in for 3 years. They'd been paid in advance, so we're completely broke. So I had to come up with money-making enterprises. So we came up with this thing that we called match day sponsorship. And for some reason I got on a roll, and we used the footy show as a vehicle to do it, and we did it with all the clubs. So we said, whatever you want, we're here for you. And suddenly we started making good money, and then by the time we got the club going again, we had Mick Malthouse had come across, and so the first year with Mick we finished second bottom, next year we finished 9th, next year we played in the 2002 grand final. And it was an exciting time because it was the Foreign Legion. We pulled all these different players who were just great people, and it was exciting. I was only 34. I became president on my 34th birthday, so I took over the club when I was 33.
Wow.
But and Carla, my wife, was 27. Now, you think about that now.
That's crazy.
The president's wife was younger than half the list.
Yeah.
Half the list trying to have a crack at her, I think, too. But So it was exciting times, and the footy show was exploding, and everything was going, and suddenly you find yourself right in amongst it. But when you go to the game, so you're looking to make sure the cheer squad's not killing each other. You're watching the rain. If the rain knocks 10,000 off the gate, that's going to cost you this amount of money. Making sure they've got the right, right jumpers on. Everything's going on. I mean, I might have micromanaged a bit, but back in those days, there weren't too many of us, so we had to do it.
You're so heavily invested in the players as well, right?
You're in with them, and you're great friends with them, and I was probably lucky as well that I had great relationships with all the players because they came through the footy show. And Dermot was, my great mate. The stupidity we got up to. I was there with him the night he rode the Harley Davidson into the Metro nightclub up onto the.
Were you? So we've had Derm on the and he spoke about that, but you were there.
I was the one who reported it.
How highly organised was that, or was that just just happened?
No, just the people out the front, and he was a bit worried about the Harley, and he drove in and he went up onto the first floor landing, and I'm laughing, and because I was waiting for him with my mate Colin Delutis, who ended up becoming vice president of Carlton, and Colin had a 500 SL, Derm had a Ferrari and a Harley, and I had a Telstar.
Not a Tesla, a Telstar.
A Telstar. Yeah, I thought they were signing me up to be a Telly star. I got a Telstar. Anyway, so we're there, and Derm was great because the bouncers, if you mention what's going on here? And of course he gets off, and he had this black helmet, and he had the big mane in those days, and he shook his hair like he was in a shampoo commercial. And there he was, and and we went in, and as I said, he was only in there for a little while, and he came out with a pillion passenger, and away he went.
That is good. That's a ripping story.
But we used to have so much fun Thursday. And I remember one time with Derm was sitting at Colin's place on a Thursday night, and Colin and I had to get him up off the couch. He couldn't move. He had broken ribs. And so I did the story the next day. Brereton won't play. Because I'd been with him the night before. And he came out the next day and kicked 11. Had the inflatable vest underneath his jumper, and he played against Richmond, kicked 11 in the wet on the MCG. And
he was tough.
Derm, it's funny now. I think Derm is underrated as a player. Jason Dunstall, superstar, and gets a lot of the and deserves everything he gets. But Derm, I think, averaged 7 goals a game playing at full forward. He played centre-half forward and did all the hard work. I mean, again, Jason Dunstall, legend. Both of them are the pair. And I was talking to Derm about this recently, and he made the very good point that in those days there was a lot of great full forwards who kicked hundreds of goals, but the ones who won the premierships had a centre-half forward and a full forward, and you had the two. So the two of them together. And I think Derm, with the injuries, and then he went to Sydney and up at Collingwood for a year, I think people talk him down. I think he's been so available in the media from the time we were doing all these stunts when we were both 23 years of age. I think we became mates when we were about 22, actually in Adelaide, believe it or not, at a state match. So I think he gets marked down for his accessibility and his show business. He kept football going to him. He was just unbelievable. The Doer Hawks. He was the bloke who brought show business, and he took on Essendon and Sheedy and walked through the packs, and he was singing, and we talk about Isaac Rankin. Dermot used to do that every week on Ernie and Denise. He'd be on there every Monday morning.
Difference would be that Isaac Rankin can sing and play an instrument, except Derm's just there mumbling away. Ed,
very much so.
I want to stay in footy.
Yeah, sure.
Your time at Collingwood, and I will tell a story about 2018 that I think about a lot. But let's start with the good stuff first, right, Ed?
So do we need to go to that?
we won't talk about 18 first. What's it like winning a premiership in 2010 off a drawn grand final?
Well, I go back to 1990 because I was a mad Collingwood supporter, and you wouldn't believe it. Because of the draw when Collingwood drew with West Coast Eagles in the first semi-final, season was a replay in those days, and Robert Walls couldn't call the game because he'd booked an overseas trip, and I got a phone call from 3XY to, would you call the game? So the first game of football I called for points, as opposed to the VFA I called and the exhibition games, was the 1990 grand finals.
Wow.
So was this a press red for Ed before it?
Oh, no, I was very line of like that. But I grew up in the backyard, Collingwood playing Essendon because of my brother, calling this game in my mind all the time. And here it is. It unfolds in that week. And I thought we were absolutely odds on to win. I thought we killed them in the second semi-final, and the momentum was on. I go down there, and then, of course, I have to leave the box at the 10-minute mark, and I'm on the ground. When you see Lee Matthews come down doing that one, I'm the reporter sitting on the ground. Somehow I've gone from standing over in the Southern Stand as a kid at all those grand finals, watching them in standing room in 1977, the draw, 27 points up at three-quarter time, then losing the next week, then 79, the Harms hits it back, the siren goes in, world record, early time, and the final quarter went 26 minutes, I think, anyway. Not that I haven't got over these things. 81, I'm in standing room behind it, Ashman kicks the goal, the ball hits me. Wow. Talk about insult to injury, and you could just see it unfolding. Here we go again. And then to get to 1990 and Lee Matthews, and just to be there on that day, it was everything. It was the greatest moment of my life at that stage. You fast forward to 2010 when we won, and we had to go the hard way again with the draw. And again, I thought we were going to kill them in the replay game, and thought we'd got our mindset right. Mick Malthouse was just absolutely magnificent that week. Scotty Pendlebury had basically dysentery in the first game, lost 5 kilos, came out and won the Norm Smith battle. I think Nick Maxwell doesn't get anywhere near what he should for saving that game that first week. He was just heroic. And I'm watching the game, and Nick Riewoldt kicked the ball out of the pack, the bounce, and you see Nick Maxwell get there and touch it on the line. And I'm thinking that's the same bounce that Jezza did in 1970. I watch, I've got a mental block. Brendan Goddard takes the big mark. That's Jezza in 1970. I'm watching all these moments in time of my heart being broken from when I was a 5-year-old listening to it on the radio in 1970. First time I actually cried for something outside of stubbing my toe was that. And suddenly it's happening, and it's opening up in front of. So the first one, we had the game shot, and then suddenly they come back, they hit the front. I go, oh no, and I thought that was the end. I was going to finish up then. There was no more. I was absolutely emotionally wrought. Yeah, and there was nothing anyway. We got up and we got the draw. I thought, right, we're right here. And I'd read all the books about the 1977 draw. The Coach was a famous book, was probably one of the few books inside the North Melbourne Football Club, and they followed Barras. And I'd memorised what happened in 77 where Collingwood sort of disappeared into the night and, we've been cursed, we should have won. And, they had a draw in a grand final but felt they'd lost because they were 27 points up. And I didn't want that to happen. I met Mick down on the ground and said, look, we go to the dinner tonight. And then it was a bit of luck our way because all the rooms had flooded. And at the MCG.
It was 2010, wasn't it?
Yeah, the sewage had come up. So we had to go over into the southern stand. So we had a little bit of think time out there. And Jeff Walsh was great, and David Butterfin, our fitness guy, and Maxie had gone off his head in the press, remember on the ground?
Yeah, that's right.
We shouldn't have to come back. I said, mate, you're the luckiest bloke alive. You're almost a losing Collingwood captain in a grand final. So we go across. We go that night, and we walk in, everyone's got their heads down. And I just walked around. It's half time. And Mick gave one of the great speeches. And we were able to get we had a travel agency at Collingwood. So first thing we did is got all the partners, all the parents. Don't ask a question. Your holiday's paid for. We're going to fix it all up. And I'd already spoken to Andrew Dimitri about what we're going to do, all these things. Your tickets are right. In fact, stay in a hotel. Don't go back to their house. Give them some fresh air. And then we got in the boys and did all the tests. And, they're all flat because it was a hot day. And we told them, oh, no, you're brand new. Well, we didn't. Mick and David Butterfin told them and psyched them up. That's why the Lexus Centre, we've got, they're hanging their coats on nails down there. And their president came out, Greg Westaway, and said, the game should be played on a Sunday to give extra time. I came and said, no, we're right to go Friday night. I'm making it up.
Anyway, like, what the heck are you doing, man?
But that night was a pivotal moment. Scott Pendlebury and Maxie talk about it as well, about we got everyone from being flat to right. Okay, so by the time we finished, everyone was fed. And I was really worried that in 77 there was no mobile phones. And it was bad enough for the players then. They told me, and I asked a few of them over the years, I said, we're all over the place. And, people are ringing up and the next day. And I didn't want our guys getting all the text messages and just feeling flat. So I said, right, let's have a good night. Got the band up and we had a night like it was a mid-year, 200-game party for somebody.
Brilliant.
And we got it going again. Got next morning, everyone's down. I met at 6 o'clock on Sunday morning with Andrew Dimitri to go through so that I could go down at 8 o'clock to training and say, right, boys, we're right. you're going to get this amount of money. And they straight away, it was good. I think they got about 30 grand or something. Said, right, you're in. Because we worked out how much the replay was going to be worth. It was going to be mozza for the AFL. and then we had everyone's holidays rebooked. So everyone was happy. It became an adventure. And I remember Barras in 77 got up at that dinner and he said to all the women, didn't address the players, he addressed the women he said, I need your boyfriend, your husband, I need your men for one more week and we'll create history and it'll go down in folklore forever. And I don't know if they remembered it, but I did. And I was at the game. I was a 12-year-old. And it was the first grand final I went to, so certainly it resonated with me. So, yeah, so to win.
You wanted how you handled it, though, basically.
I think the club did. I think, as I said.
Players are good to execute it.
Players were unbelievable. They lifted, but they just needed to be taken the right direction. As I said, Mick Malthouse was just sensational that week. He was everything you could ever hope for in a coach. Mick helps save our club. He rebuilt it. I wanted it built in his image, and he did it. And he took us through from when we were useless and with sort of the Foreign Legion, and then we rebuilt, and then we got in. People forget in that period where we had the succession, as they say these days, but the transition. We went preliminary final, premiership, grand final, preliminary final. It's not bad.
Yeah.
And take that all day.
You literally can't win them all.
You can't win them all. We were stiff. I mean, we got beaten by Gary Ablett, a snap in the preliminary final, unbelievable. In a game that was in the balance to the last second. Yeah, we were in it till sort of 10-minute mark in 2011. And then the following year, we got beaten by Sydney the day after we buried Johnny McCarthy. And everyone was, again, just mentally, before the game, the guys were in tears.
Yeah.
So, I thought that was as good a performance by the Collingwood Football Club as anything, and we lost the preliminary final. And they're the nuances when you say your love for the club and the players. To see them going through difficult times, to see them grow as men. Chris Tarrant, we had him down he was going to go back to Mildura when he was 18 years of age, and we hijacked him, got him down to Portsea, and Jane and Rob were with us and cooked dinner, and I remember grabbed a piece of chicken on his fork and scratched his head. He's just a country kid, and now he's building a house at the end of my street. He's one of the great success stories that football has brought through, and all those guys, the Rat Pack, they're all my great friends.
Well, I think people look at one result and it's just a great, that story you've just told, I ask, how was winning a premiership in 2010? And you went back to 1970. So,
so how was it for me in the end? I'll give you the short end.
No, but I just think
it was everything I had ever dreamed.
Yes, but I think the point is that it's not, it was great. It was a lifetime. It was a lifetime. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, I probably got the joy of a supporter, to be honest, watching my son win the national championships in America. Because I was just a father, just in there with all the other parents and had no control. The coach didn't know who I was, didn't know who he was. And going there and going on that journey over the summer for the months where they got beaten in the last game and there was a riot, literally. It's a Donnybrook when the cops on the ground are separating the players with capsicum spray and horses between Michigan and our team, Ohio State. And then they got on this run, and the first time ever there was a final 12, had to win 4 big games, and we're flying. First game was in Ohio, minus 15 degrees on a Saturday night. Imagine trying to get people to turn up the footy minus 15. It was freezing, but we killed them. Then we play Oregon at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, the granddaddy of them all. I'm standing there going, how does this happen? It's a long way from Broady. And then they clean them up. They beat Oregon. Then we end up at Dallas Cowboy Stadium for Texas in Dallas. Unbelievable. Win that one again, and then we end up at Atlanta, Georgia, where I'd been to a Super Bowl, believe it or not, and they beat the famous Notre Dame with, James Rendell playing as the opposite punter, whose father was a mate of mine for the last 30-odd years.
Huh.
Matty Rendell worked with me at Collingwood as my recruiting guy. Huh. And I'm looking out there watching, and Leonie, his mum, was my makeup artist at Channel 10 when I was 18. You talk about connections, and I'm watching these two boys who grew up in Melbourne 10 miles from each other, basically, walking together at Atlanta Stadium, 35 million people watching, and they find each other and shake hands and wish each other best luck before the game. And I'm going, wow, this is just unbelievable. And then we were lucky enough that we won, and Joe played well, and it was enormous. So from that point of view, I think the pure joy of winning was very much there, whereas at Collingwood it was a lifetime religious experience for me and dedication. Because I think you realise, I mean, as a little boy, I immersed myself in Collingwood. It was everything. And I'll never forget the first time I went to Victoria Park. We walked over the station and I saw the black and white stands for the first time, and we stood in the forward pocket with my dad, and the lady at the front gave me a bit of cake and things like that, and the pies ran onto the ground and the whole roar. It was the first time I ever felt something bigger than myself and my family, this roar of the Collingwood faithful. And I look around and they're all like me. They're just all fanatical supporters, and I went, wow, this is my tribe.
Sounds like religion, Ed.
Was, yeah, but it was, but for me it was a sense of identity. I mean, religion was big in my upbringing. I mean, Catholic family, came out to get away from sectarianism in Scotland. He couldn't get a job, all that sort of stuff. So that was very much a hallmark of what we're into. So yeah, there were a lot of prayers at the footy as well.
So was Maynard blocked?
Yeah.
Did he play on?
And you know he was.
Did he play on?
What's that?
Did Dom Shee play on?
No. There's when he came
So
in.
was Maynard blocked by Willie Rioli, and then did Dom Shee play on after the fact?
Oh yeah, he did. Yeah, sorry, I haven't thought when he lined up. I'll tell you something I've never told anybody.
Perfect.
The end of 2017, there was a big push to sack Bucks, okay? And I spoke to Scotty Pendlebury and the players. And, what's going on? Is there? Because I thought he was right. I wanted him to be the coach, but didn't want it to just be a captain's or a president's pick and all that. And there's really strong support. And I thought we were just about to turn. We'd rebuilt. We had to strip the place down a bit, and Bucks copped a lot of flack in that period. Anyway. So we decided we're staying with Bucks. We have a board meeting. No, he's right, and away we go. So it wasn't a major thing, but it was more than bubbling under the surface from a lot of people, and everyone was copying heat over it. Anyway, we plough on. A clairvoyant tells my wife, "You're going to have a good." I think my wife asked her, "How are we going to go?" And this woman said, "No, I don't talk about sport and for betting." I said, "No, this is." Not about that. What do you got for me? She goes, no, you're going to have and she didn't know anything about football or anything. She said, no, you're going to have a good year. Yeah. And Carly goes, what do you mean good year? I said, no, you're going to play in the grand final. Now, we'd missed the finals the last 3 years, I think. Okay, well, and she said, and I said, and do we win? She said, no. So I'm sitting there at the MCG when Treloar gets it, dump kicks up. This bloke takes Tagoe out of the play. McGovern takes the mark. I look up, see the time clock, watch the field. McGovern kicks it off his shin. All right, it's supposed to kick it straight there to the big ruckman. Vardy, hadn't touched it for 5 years.
He's a ruckman, Ed.
I know.
The smartest.
Yeah, I know, but he catches it and then he gets it going. It goes up. We've got 2-1-1 in a marking contest. Our two blokes go for the mark and, I'm screaming, punch to the boundary.
They couldn't hear you?
Couldn't hear me, no. Punch! Mark taken, kicked up.
Lamb Ryan. That was Lamb Ryan.
Yeah, I know who it was, yeah. And don't forget, in this game, I mean, the first quarter when we're killing you, ball bounces off the back of Rioli's leg and goes in for a goal. He didn't even know it hit him.
Goal's a goal.
I know it's a goal's a goal, but all those moments are happening. And in the back of my mind, I started thinking about this clairvoyant. Oh, no. So there's a shot and then, Bruz gets blocked. He plays on, doesn't play on, goes back. And I'm sitting there going, if he misses this, we win. The clairvoyant's got it right. We're in the grand final. And he lines up. And as soon as he walked in, I'm a bit of a pedant on approaching to goals. You can almost tell when someone's going to hand his head over the ball. I'm watching it that closely. I'm watching his hand dropping it on. His approach was right. He kicks right through the ball. I'm on the other side of the ground. As soon as it left his boot, I knew it's a goal. And there's a shot, you see me, I just did it. There's a shot, they cut to the crowd with me and my boys, and I just go. And that's when the moment I went, no, this clairvoyant. And I look up, I go, oh, no.
Mate, I never.
Anyway.
You said you never told anyone that. I've never heard it.
That's great.
No, because it's crazy.
Can I tell you a story that probably no one really has heard? Maybe there's probably rumours around it. But so one thing I remember from the grand final, other than winning it, Ed, and I'm not trying to rub it in.
No, don't matter. It's your grand final. You win. Hey, 2 hours, you've got to be happy. You win, you celebrate. We lick our wounds and
Correct.
we celebrate your win.
The story that I want to tell is, and I don't know if you remember it, but one thing that is vivid in my mind was, we won a grand final. Mind you, I've lost a grand final, and I know what that feels like, and it's something I don't like talking about, and it's burned a hole in my whole identity.
I always say you lose a part of your soul that you never get back.
Correct.
You lose a grand final.
Exactly right.
When you're right involved in it.
But we won. The stuff happens on the ground. We go downstairs. It's a massive blur. There's a billion people in the rooms, like anyone who's, fourth grade teachers trying to get in the rooms. You can't move. You know what it's like.
Yeah.
And I was with my family. I had some significant trauma that year. I lost my best mate to a car accident. I'd lost my dad a few years before, and I was really playing for them. So it was really emotional for me to do that. And I'd been dropped for finals before the Collingwood qualifying. So I thought that dream was gone for me. So to play in that game, it was more than winning a grand final for me. It was basically my identity as a footballer. Yeah. So I remember being in the rooms, like, highly emotional, with my closest family, and mate, you popped up, and I'll never forget your attitude and your, I guess, grace in defeat. Looking me in the eye, just not a skerrick of what you've just done, which is absolutely shattered, and I can just imagine how shattered you would have been. But shaking my hand and saying, "Mate, you guys were too good today. Like, just a brilliant performance." And for me, like, I was surprised. I was like, "What? Eddie McGuire's down here, the president of Collingwood." It was 5 minutes after we were down there. Like, you were in our rooms before you were in your own, weren't you? You had to have been.
Pretty much. I think I went in and came out. I'm very big on that. Why 2018? Probably, obviously, it resonates and hurts and all that sort of stuff. But I was satisfied that we were beaten by a champion team. And we left it all out there. Okay, somebody should have punched him. We joke about that. The game was just an amazing game. And you guys were absolutely brave, and you deserved the victory. Both teams probably deserved the victory, but you won. When the siren goes, you're in front, you get the big silver cup, and we live to fight another day. And I'm very big on that. I think you've got to be hard at it and leave nothing behind in preparation and doing everything, and any inch of help I could get for Collingwood, real or imagined, you're in doing it. But when you get done, that's it. And so even back, I suppose I go back to my schooling. I went to Christian Brothers College St Kilda, and the brothers were pretty big on that. You go in and you congratulate. If you're vanquished, you do that, and if you win, you do it in a reasonably modest way, but enjoy the celebrations. But no, that was such to me, the game itself was just one for the ages, and I just thought it was appropriate to go in and say, for all those reasons. Now, you say that, I go back when we won in 2010, all that litany of history in my mind, and every player has got a story. So your story, for me, I go away, well, there's at least something was there for the Schofield family after all these things. And as we used to have on our song, it's more than a game. It's all these moments and that's what I love about the game. I see the game being, yes, there's the football and the media and all that type of thing, but it permeates society. And, and now women are getting the same opportunities. And to me, it's always been more than the rules and the AFL and, the spreadsheets and, clearly, Collingwood was broke. We had to become successful again to be able to do all those things. But for me, being able to have Collingwood have 300 people every night sleeping in our accommodation, and largely Indigenous people and things. And we ran a thing called the Burrawong Project where we're getting young guys and placing them in jobs, Indigenous kids. And then there was another one we had where we had recidivist domestic violence perpetrators who would go in, get more angry, come back out, belt mum and the kids even more, and so then we would intercept them, and it's these things, they work, and I think governments should go to these things that we're doing with the Salvation Army, Brendan Noddle. They're the things that I take away, because I used to say to people at Collingwood, you're not going to win every game. You're not going to win the flag every year, but we have to leave an imprint somewhere. You have to leave something other than an odour in life, Come in, and if you can leave the place better for the experience, so be it. And if that means we have Christmas lunch with 600, 700, 800 people every year at Collingwood now, which I started when it was started just before I became president. We got it going. And for me and my family to go down there on Christmas Day became our tradition. And it meant so much. And I think you talk about the payback on how that resonates with my two boys, who would then go home and, have presents and dinner and loving family and everything, but had been there earlier. And what they used to do is they used to let the convicts out basically on Christmas Eve. They'd go and have Christmas. They had nowhere to go. We'd have blokes scratching their eyes out who were on ice and things like that. And, and then you realise just how lonely. There was a whole group of deaf people who clearly had nowhere to go. And then we started getting all these students, Asian students who were there who had nowhere to go, and it's just lonely on Christmas Day. And I remember this bloke walked in, and he's up on his toes. And I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Brazil." I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, nothing." He said, "I heard that there was lunch on here. I want to come down and, celebrate with somebody." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, do you want to come and help us?" So rather than sit out there, he was carving the turkey up and all part of it. He loved it. And suddenly there was this celebration of what Christmas is really all about. So that's what footy can do. So great when we win and we'll sing the song. We beat, hopefully, we beat the Sydney Swans on Friday night, or we go on and do things. But all those other elements, and seeing kids like Geordie DeGoey, who was going through a rough patch, working, and understanding that he was actually, he's got the golden ticket. Don't waste it. And it's like with kids. People always say to me, "How many chances do you give these blokes?" And I go, "As many as it takes."
Just like anyone else.
Until it's exhausted. People want to put a line through everybody. And the media, I'm the media. But, always the headline, coach axed, player sacked. That's the headline, and it lasts for 2 days, and then you're on to the next person. There's a fair bit. Being president of the club was great for me because I thought I knew the insides of football clubs as well as you could as a media person. Then you get it right inside, and then you go, "Wow, there's a whole onion here to be unpeeled," and it was an amazing experience. It was great. I loved it.
That's very good stories, mate. Hey, mate, I think we've got to get you out the door to the bloody Premier of South Australia. So before we do that, we've got to ask, got to get to our social media section here. I know you're a segment man, but this is where the people like to ask you the questions. You've heard enough from Dan and I.
Yeah.
But we like to give an opportunity to our audience to ask you a few questions.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Dylan Demo.
Suggestions or words of advice to encourage more young professionals getting into AFL administration?
Well, I've been pushing this for a long time. I think that the AFL should be going out and getting young people in and then formally training them. Send them to Harvard or Princeton or whatever and accumulate. We've got an amazing, I'm probably a good example. Love football, wanted to play, all those that went a different direction. So for every player, there's 100 others who can be in the media, medical, research, communications, marketing, admin. And what we should be doing is shining the huge spotlight that comes onto the game itself should then be dissipated to others. So I've always wanted to get the Collingwood Art Prize up because our artists love the footy and things, but don't get anywhere near the publicity. So we should be doing that. And, we had I wanted to do a deal with the ballet college actually because we've got this magnificent gym, come and use it type of thing. So so for me, I think that's the opportunity to go and get that and train people up and then send them into the workforce. If you ever look what's happened in Victoria with major events, and I declare I'm on the board of Visit Victoria, but we have the best gig economy. Now, you go anywhere in the world, you turn up, there's an Aussie who had worked at a Melbourne Cup, the Grand Prix, the Grand Final, all the events, gather round in South Australia now. Western Australia's got fantastic. The stadium there is fantastic, and what they're going to do will become even bigger and better. That opportunity to go into the world. So you go there from Sydney 2000 onwards, basically Australians ran Olympic Games everywhere. and they're in all the big organisations, and that's what we should be doing. So we need to get that secondary and tertiary industry behind football, not just the playing of the game, and it opens it right up.
I like that. I've got one here, Dan, from Nick Westall. Shout out Nick Westall, used to work with the podcast. He wants to know, who wants to be a millionaire? Was anyone ever fed any questions? Did you pick the stories over the what's the deal there? Was it just
no? Luckily, because I would have. I got there's one funny phone call. I did a celebrity version one time, and Molly Meldrum won $500,000. Right? Because Molly really well read, and he was shaking. He had his orange juice, which was that much vodka and that much juice, whacking him down. So he's going to be shickered by the end of this anyway. So he wins the $500,000. I go home the next night and I had a Collingwood board meeting, and my wife had said to me, Carla said, look, come home tonight. We haven't seen each other. You've been recording the show, calling the football all weekend, footy show, et cetera, et cetera. It was right in that period when I was doing everything. And she said, I'm going to cook really nice dinner. We just have dinner together, right? Okay, so I walk in, I'm on the phone, finishing up after the board meeting. She gives me the look, turn the phone off. She pulls the roast out of the oven, the candles on the table, the wine is decanted, everything's beautiful. I go, wow, how lucky am I? And the home phone rings. And she gives me the look of death, and I go, well it'll be my mum, but this will be, it's fun. Hello, it's Kerry Packer. Kerry, now, Kerry rings us usually. He's not ringing up to tell you you've won Tats Lotto,
Yeah.
So anyway, he starts. I saw you last night giving all my effing money to all your effing mates. I saw you. And of course, I knew him a bit by this day. I knew he's half G now. And I said, hey, relax, it went to charity. You'll get the tax deduction on it anyway. He's laughing. But you don't have a short conversation with Kerry and you don't wind him up. So Carl's just put the roast back in the oven, shut the door. And an hour later, I'm still going and he's solving the surface at Colonial Stadium as it was in those days. And this and, Plugger. I don't think they can win a grand final with him in the side. This is the tactics we use in polo and this. And, his insights are unbelievable.
Yes.
You're getting a masterclass from Kerry Packer.
Yep.
You're not going to hang up on him or anything else like that. And so they were funny days, those things. But so back to the thing. No, we didn't. Clearly, if I got a live one on, I'd play because it was, it's entertainment show.
Yes.
And it lent itself to be able to speak to people and get their stories. But there's one guy who he won 250 and he was in a suit. He's just a bit like myself. His daughter was up the back, and you think, he's a successful businessman. These cue cards, got all that. Anyway, he won the 250, and we came off air, and I said to him, "You okay?" He started shaking. He said, I was going to have to pull my daughter out of school tomorrow, and I was meeting the real estate. It was right in the global financial crisis. I said, "How much did you need?" He said, 200. I said, "Oh, you got a holiday as well." He said, and they don't have any phones, so I said, "Do you want to ring your wife?" I've got my phone. I said, "Yeah, ring your wife." And just he melted in front of me. This guy, just the pure relief that came from it. So a lot of great stories like that.
Mate, Dom Sheet ate your heart out in pressure moment. He's got to knock back 250 when he needs 200.
Dom Sheet, stop mentioning his name.
Well, someone asked, what's Luke Johnson's question just down the bottom?
Have you ever heard of a player called Dom Sheet? There you go.
Yeah.
Well, here you go. You can return serve a bit on this one. Emma Victoria 79 says, any advice for the West Coast Eagles?
It's interesting. I on a podcast with Jimmy Bartell this week I asked him, I said, for $1 million, I'll put the old quizmaster on.
Hot seat.
Who's the president of the West Coast Eagles?
Mate, is it? I don't know.
It's Elizabeth Haynes.
It is too.
Right? And he didn't know, and I had to look it up. And at the function last night, Elizabeth obviously heard the podcast, and she came up and I said to her, look, I'd love to catch up and have a chat to you. And I said, there wasn't a shot at you. I said, because no one knew that Paul Fitzpatrick was for the last few years either. And I think in football clubs you have to have corporate governance, clearly. Right? You have to have all the things there, but you still got to, and I'm not saying West Coast don't have this because I'm too far away, but at the moment, I looked at the stuff with Oscar Allen, and I understand all that, but he should have been signed up before he was made captain. Okay, once you're captain, you're captain, and I would have flown over to Hawthorn training and stood there with a checkbook, throwing it at their players. Give it to them. get back in, or you've got to get back in. The club's got to be, one in, all in these situations. And I just wonder I thought West Coast were probably affected more than any other club in COVID, and it did make a big impact. People still don't understand the impact of COVID. It really cooked a lot of people, clubs, and so that last game they finally played with Collingwood won by a point. Just about was both teams were out on their feet, and we got flogged the next week by Geelong.
That ended my career, by the way.
That was your end of your career?
I was first emergency for that game.
Good. Let's talk about that then.
I dropped again, and I watched that play. And then when that game was over, I was done.
That was it. I think everyone was. And so my only thing is that I think West Coast are just an amazing club. And to have a good AFL, you have to have a good West Coast Eagles. So they've got into the death spiral with their list and different things. And, Simo was finished and he was exhausted. And that premiership group, which you don't ever deny, after 2018, you think, well, the West Coast are going to be a chance for the next few, as they were. Things come and go. If we knew what was going on, we wouldn't turn up, would we? That's why we go to the footy every week. But I'd really like to see a bit of the football passion come back into the Eagles. Now, they've got young kids, so it's easier said than done. But yeah, I'd like to see the Eagles lift their elbow a bit on a few of these things and get stuck in and play angry, as we say.
I like that. Yep. That's the advice I've been given too. Two more. One about the eggs, but last one, I think it's interesting given we're in Adelaide. Paddy money.
Eddie, your thoughts on the Port Adelaide tarps and the prison bar Guernseys?
Well, the tarps nearly killed them, and because I was in meetings where the line was going through Port Adelaide, there was a thought at one stage maybe Adelaide can't have two sides, and David Koch and his team have done an amazing job. And I said this to him the other night, actually. He was on our show, and I said, I don't think you get the recognition. So they've rebuilt. They've got a DNA now. Never Tear Us Apart is fantastic. They did that. The fight over the jumpers, I half bought into it as well because it was good, and they had to fight somebody, didn't they? But that's what I'm saying. They took on Collingwood, took on me, and I was up for the fight. They say the prison bars, which I think is probably an inappropriate term these days, but it's actually the silhouette of the pier down at Port. Right. So I know a fair bit of the history. You
would have had to be well researched.
Yeah, I was well researched beforehand because I actually loved the Port Adelaide story in the old days in the Sandful. So they started, their first jumper was magenta, which no one has, right? So I think in the search for colours, and teal, my wife was in the fashion caper and she put these teal colours into Harris Scarf over here 25 years ago. They sold like Topsy, so there's a commercial part to it. So I've always said to them, why don't you saw the other week they wore the teal jumper, which was distinctive and people wearing it. I think this is good. A lot of kids apparently said, oh, that's a good colour. If they had their pier, prison bars, in teal and black, or teal with a black or white, whatever they want to do, any combination, it'd be a sensational jumper. And they're not Port Magpies. The Port Magpies play in the Sandful, and they're long gone. And you can't be the Magpies. That is our trademark.
Yeah.
When the Dockers wanted to become the Dockers, they had to go and buy the Dockers for a sizable amount of money off Levi's. People don't realise that.
Right.
Levi's Dockers was a brand. Huh. And Peter Murphy, who was on the board of Collingwood, was actually the guy from Levi's. And Jeff Brown went and did the deal on behalf of the AFL. So they've got trademarks. And I can never quite understand why you'd want to go against the biggest brand. Right? That's the brand. You've got to have your own brand, particularly, I think, in a smaller market. Anyway, that's my rationale on it. And, get stuffed. That's it.
Yes, I was going to say, stop towing the company line.
That's all the commercial thing. And I was, okay, let's go behind the stand and duke it out.
Yeah, that's very good.
So it was great. So, but Port Adelaide, a fantastic club. And, I think we're all got through all that, I think, now.
Yeah.
I've still got the contract signed 3 times that they can't wear it.
Yeah, right. It's night grand finals, rotating rotating grand finals.
That deal was done in my kitchen. 25 years. Extra 25 years. Yeah. AFL got $250 million to fix up Marvel and then used that money to help fix up Adelaide Oval and everything else. So that's it. And you don't want to play... We've got to be big time. When you go to America, I went to America, met with the New England Patriots, And they were being very gracious to me. And Jonathan Kraft, the owner's son, and Bob Kraft went out, and as luck would have it, his PA was from Melbourne. And I'd walked in, Eddie, how are you? He goes out and he asked me, he's winding up the meeting, and I thought, they've been hospitable and all the rest of it. And anyway, he says to me, how big's your ground? I said, 100,000 seats. And he did this when he walked out and he asked, he said, true, 100,000. She got the MCG, came back in. Suddenly, we're out for dinner that night together. So we are a very small organisation. But when we did the deal with the NFL recently for the NFL to come to Melbourne next year, they talk about the MCG. Right? And that is the P for everyone coming here. The World Rugby want to play at the MCG. Taylor Swift wants to play at the MCG. And we've got these other great stadiums. Perth Stadium's unbelievable. Adelaide Oval. We're going to get the Olympic Stadium up in Queensland now. We've got this absolutely going beautifully. Just leave well enough alone. It's like Gather Round. Don't change it. It's great here. Come up with something different.
I'll tell you who doesn't want to play at the MCG is an interstate side when they're finished on top of the ladder and they've got to go and play Hawthorn in 2015, lose our home ground advantage. That's who doesn't want to play there.
What's that, in a grand final?
Yeah.
There's no home ground advantage at the MCG. We don't have a home ground. West Coast have a home ground advantage. They play everyone over there 11 times, or 10, and you get Fremantle times.
I'd be surprised if some Collingwood players knew where Perth was, honestly.
We don't need to, mate. We don't get to the outback. We stay in. No, but the point there is, but who do we play at the MCG? We play Melbourne, who've played there for 150 years. We play Carlton, play Essendon. It's a neutral ground.
You can't. You guys can't fly more than 5 times a year. That's outrageous.
But you know why? That was the deal done to break out the preliminary final, so that you could play the preliminary final in Perth. That was the year when at one stage it looked like West Coast were going to play Fremantle and have to play it in Melbourne. We did the deal in the Collingwood boardroom. We had 3 whiteboards, AFL, Andrew Demetrio, Stephen Goff from the Melbourne Cricket Club, and me in the middle trying to join the dots. And that's what it was. We got the deal that was to finance the building of the Southern Stand was based on the super boxes in the finals, and they had to have all preliminary finals, all grand finals, which was signed off probably before the non-Victorian teams were in, to be honest. We moved that across, and that meant that Collingwood had to play 15 games or 14 games at the MCG to make up for the loss of income and to be able to. So that's what it's all is. It's Collingwood playing there, and people don't know this one either. We went up and played a one-off game against Sydney when they had a bye week one year and there was no games on. So the next year Sydney were about to lose $1.5 million. And I rang Richard Collis and said, why don't we come up and play on that fallow weekend, because I don't like the idea of no football on. People might go and find out there's life outside of football. So we went up and we did a big thing on the footy show, planes, trains and automobiles, 78,000, biggest crowd ever at Stadium Australia as it was then known, and they had the biggest gate in the history of football. So they made millions that year, and away we went. And like all good ideas in the AFL, no, everyone's got to chip away at it until it disappears. So they mucked up. That was the game. That was opening round. They already did that. They mucked it up. Anyway, so the point being, so they're the games that you have to get Collingwood to go to, blockbuster games, and make a truckload out of them and get the football tourism going. But we were there because... the story of that was the next 2 days later on a Tuesday, my phone rings in the office as Bob Carr, the New South Wales Premier. He said, and Bob couldn't draw football. He reads American history when he goes to sporting events. And anyway, he rings, he said, all I know, he said, I don't know anything about your team or anything. He said, all I know is everywhere I looked on the Sunday, the zoo, restaurants, everything, all I could see was black and white scarves everywhere. Who are you, basically? And he said, what about if we offer you $5 million cash and all expenses to play Anzac Day? He said, we'll put the flotilla up the Hawkesbury River. We'll have a massive Anzac Memorial. It'll be the biggest Anzac Day ever. And you play Essendon up here, not Sydney. You bring Essendon up, you come. And I rang the AFL and said, look, it's a really good offer, but we don't want to do this. I don't want to muck around with Anzac Day. The solemnity of the day is too important at the MCG. So we went back to the Victorian government, got $50 million out of them to rebuild the members stand at the MCC for the AFL members, of which all clubs get the benefit. So we are a benevolent society at Collingwood.
So if we go full circle, Collingwood are good blokes.
We are.
I feel like picking an argument with Eddie McGuire over why Collingwood should be flying into state is probably a bad idea.
As long as they have to do too many opening rounds in other places.
Dan's a big West Coast man. Look,
That's okay.
I'm breaking this up.
Why don't you play your opening round out in the
I'd love to play.
out in the middle of nowhere in front of
love to play
12,000
opening
people?
round.
Talk about burn the brand. Collingwood's the biggest brand in the
going down the
country.
bum- they're going down the
playing out
Bunbury,
of the
playing North
showgrounds. Mason Cox said there were cows on there the night before. What's going on?
That was good. That was good, James. We're the last guy.
Last question, and this is a quick one. It's from Tappy95. How does Eddie like his eggs? Sincerely, the Eggman.
Well, that's actually my kryptonite. I can't eat the white of eggs.
Right.
I can eat scrambled eggs. Love scrambled eggs.
Yep.
The yolk, no problem. And I'll order, and my wife thinks that I could have been a surgeon the way that I cut the yolk away from the white. I cannot. No,
Mentally?
no, just from it's a physical thing. And I don't know why, but even as a kid, I did. So then recently I thought, oh, come on, I want to, not look like
Grow up a bit, yeah.
do this. And well, geez, I just
survived.
Just survived it. so eggs, I like eggs. When I used to put them, when training to play footy, put them in the milkshake raw and all that sort of stuff. And,
Cool.
But no, I can't eat the white of an egg. So scrambled is the answer.
I like it. Eddie, thanks for squeezing us in, mate. We really appreciate how much time you've given us, mate. And great reminiscing on some good stories. Very good.
And congratulations to you, mate. Seriously, to win a premiership, and you touched on some of the hardships that you had that year, and I was actually aware of those stories at the time. And as I said, they're the sorts of things you go, okay, there's someone else's, my pain, your joy, and there's a great story there. But I always rated you as a player, and I knew you from Geelong, and I always kept a bit of an eye on you. Thought maybe you could get him back.
Mate, you told my mum one day at a function, she come and said hello to you, and you said hello, and she said, my name's Jan, I'm Jan Schofield, Will Schofield's mum, and you propositioned her on the spot, said, how's his contract looking? He's going to come to Collingwood.
I did. It's funny how this is the first time we've actually met, other than me.
Yeah.
Tears in my eyes. Well done.
Mate.
But I did. And so well done on your career, and well done on what you're doing, both of you guys. And I think these podcasts are really important, and they're more important when it comes from somebody of your stature in football and your personality. So you're not out there pushing a barrow. You're your own person. You're an independent thinker, and these things are really important. We need to get more of this happening in the media. So going back to probably your first question about where the media is going, I think this is really important to get more avenues for people to be able to come on and talk in long form, but actually have good discussions. And you guys do good interviews. You take it off and I'll go off on 50 tangents, and I think
it's bloody good.
Went off on all.
But Eddie, as you know, mate, none of this happens without our sponsors. So thanks to Paywise.
Paywise.
Do you want to go through each of these? Paywise, powering the podcast. We've got ID Athletic.
Oh yeah, what are they? Who are ID?
They make all our merch, any gear and any teamwear. Right.
ID Athletic. PayPal, is it PayPal?
Yeah.
No,
Paywise.
Paywise better than PayPal.
Whippersnapper Whisky. You know what they do?
I like them.
Yeah.
I'm from Glasgow.
Yeah, correct. Shelter Brewing Co.
Yeah, no, Brick Lane. I've got my own one.
We got TABtouch, our investment company.
That's not Tab, is it?
No, it's
not Gil McLaughlin. TABtouch.
TABtouch.
Yeah,
West Australian. Look after us over there. We got the Leaderville Precinct, our live venue partner.
Oh yeah.
We've got On One Services, which is Jeremy McGovern. It's his electrical and plumbing business.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to support him.
And we got
took that mark and kicked it down, kicked it off his shin. Can you believe it?
On One Services, kicked it off your shin.
Is that right? If you were there, he did.
Mate, I'll tell you, McGovern off his shin to Vardy, a roughman who was wearing shin guards, who kicked it off his shin. Ryan, who actually did what he was meant to. Took a hanger, played.
It was a hanger, but the punch.
And then Sheed from Boundary. He's never kicked a goal like that in his life. Never done it again.
I know. You reckon I called a couple of him afterwards. He won't kick.
Do you remember the clairvoyance note?
No, don't remember.
Haven't gone back to her.
No.
She was right.
But I'm not even into this, right?
But she was right.
I'm not into it neither, Carla. And for some reason, this, I don't know, happened. And I said, you get the Tats Lotto numbers?
Ed, we're done.
Okay.
Thank you.